Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Biola Labi. Nigeria's immediate past Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Ibe Kowachukwu, was in Saudi Arabia earlier in the year as part of consultations between members and non-members of OPEC trying to extend an oil supply cut deal, which came into existence on January 1st, 2019. That arrangement was meant to prevent a glut that would have affected the economic fortunes of everyone concerned. But while countries like Saudi Arabia, who are in the same bracket with Nigeria as a monoproduct economies, have over the years built up superstructures to support a meaningful standard of living for their people, no one can confidently say that the same has happened in Nigeria. And so the conversation about diversification from the oil sector has been gathering momentum. For more on this, we're now being joined by Gbenga Sholotan, Head of Research and Equity Analyst, an analyst at RMB Nigeria Limited, First Merchant Rand Bank, right? Rand Merchant Bank. Gbenga, thank you for being here. You're an experienced finance professional with over 12 years of experience. You have an MBA from Warwick Business School. And on Tuesday, you were a superstar with your analysis of actually what is happening in the real sector in Nigeria, which is why we wanted to talk to you today. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about RMB's annual conference and event and what the goal of that is.
All right, so we have this annual economic and business conference every year. We had one last year, which also coincided with our 50th anniversary. And it was the title was about driving inclusive growth in the economy. Because back then, you know, when Nigeria went into a recession, as we were coming out of recession, we noticed that was the oil sector was actually leading us out of recession, and the non-oil sector was actually lagging. So we came up with the idea to have industry experts, you know, corporates, and also investors come together in a forum to discuss how to drive inclusive growth in Nigeria. And we had very good feedback from the conference. And some of the key points that were learned in there were actually put in practice. So we're happy to see that as of today, the real sector has now come, you know, to drive growth. But unfortunately, oil is now taking a backstage at this phase of Nigeria's growth.
How so? How is oil taking a backstage?
Okay, so if you look at the last 4 quarters in terms of growth for Nigeria, the growth for Nigeria has been driven by the non-oil sector. We've had positive growth, but while the oil sector, we've had negative GDP growth. So that shows you that the oil sector has taken a back seat. And also, if you look at Nigeria's history, say from the 1981 to date, as of 1981, you had oil contribution to GDP at over 30%, but that has come down to about 10% currently, at a very small amount of that. So you've seen the non-oil sector also grow over time. In terms of bigger development for Nigeria, it's safe to say oil still plays an important part because it's the major FX revenue earner for the country. If you look at Nigeria's export dynamics, you see the oil sector, it's about 90% of exports for Nigeria, so it's still a big part. And because our industries and our companies actually need, you know, to import equipment to be able to drive their operation, we should rely heavily on the foreign exchange end from the export of oil.
So what you're saying is that oil is still going to play an important role, but oil will play an important role in helping us diversify our economy.
That is correct. So like I mentioned earlier on, so basically most of the things that we use in Nigeria for the big industries, they are imported. And for us to get FX through the CBN, oil plays a big part in that. So until we're able to diversify our exports to a certain level where, you know, we reduce high dependence on the FX generated from oil, then I think that's where we need to be.
So tell us more about the real growth sector. When you say there's growth in the real sector, which is basically everything else but oil, give us some sense of what that is, what sectors, and what that means.
Okay, so based on the last data at the first quarter of 2019, telecoms and agriculture have been the key driver of growth. So what I did was I looked at the whole number and I broke it down, and I found that over 90% of the growth we had in the first quarter was largely driven by telecoms and agriculture. And I still think that, you know, in terms of the real sector, Nigeria is still living below its potential, because if you look at agriculture itself, it's about 22% of Nigeria's GDP, and it's still mostly subsistence farming. So the productivity in the agricultural sector is not even still very high, so it's still below potential. If you look at the ICT sector, telecoms is like the biggest part of it, about 95% of it. And also it shows that just only telecoms in the ICT sector that is driving growth. So just these 2 sectors are the key sectors for now that are driving growth. Manufacturing is quite big in terms of contribution, but the growth hasn't really been good. By the last 4 years, we've had only one positive year-on-year growth in the manufacturing sector. So this shows you that there's a lot of potential for the real sector, but at the moment, it's still living below potential.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think that's, we definitely want to come back and unpack that. We want to come back and unpack ICT, especially agriculture. I think we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we want to do more unpacking of what that means. Is the telecom driven more by subscription? Is it more by data? But we'll do that when we come right back now. We're going to go on a short break. Welcome back. We're still in studio with Gbenga Sholotan, Head of Research and Equity at RMB Nigeria. So before we went on break, we were talking about the IC sector growth and talking about possibly, we wanted you to sort of unpack that for us. Can you just do a little bit about, if this is accounting for 90% of the real sector growth, what does that mean? Sorry, 90% of that ICT growth is telecoms. What exactly is happening in that space?
All right, so I would say since the liberation of the telecoms sector in Nigeria via the inflow of the GSM guys, we've seen our subscription growth grow. So basically what we did was that we looked at the growth over time. We also looked at subscription growth. We've seen that there's a high level of correlation and our score of about 80%. So basically our subscriber growth continues to grow. We expect that to also drive growth in the telecom sector. So we also see more potential there because if you look at the telecom sector in terms of mobile penetration, Nigeria is about 88% mobile penetration. If you look at Nigeria's peers, where we like to rank Nigeria with South Africa, South Africa is over 100%. So basically, we still think that there's more growth in the telecom sector over time. But the key question here is that when the telecom sector begins to slow down, what happens to Nigeria's growth? Because that's the big consideration we think policymakers should begin to look at.
So speaking of policymakers, Godwin Emefiele has unrolled his 5-year monetary policy for the CBN. I wanted to get your take on it. Obviously, some parts are quite vague, like double-digit growth, single-digit inflation. That's vague. But then there were specifics, such as the trade monitoring system, which is supposed to boost non-oil exports. What do you think about that? And bank recapitalization. What would be the practical effects on our economy?
Well, I would say the bank recapitalization one appears to be a very, very big one, really, and I think it's positive. So at the last time the banks were capitalized was a while ago. Really.
2004.
Exactly. So it's been a while ago. And obviously, most of the Nigerian banks, the Tier 1 banks and some of the Tier 2 banks actually have good capital at the moment. But if we intend to support credit to the private sector, which is currently about 17% of our GDP, which is also very low compared to sub-Saharan African peers, then obviously we need to actually grow loan book, and in growing loan book also comes some risk. Recently, IFRS 9 was introduced into Nigeria, which also shows how you'll be able to kind of provision and create risk assets. So there's likely to be high levels of provision because the CBN is trying to ask the banks to grow loan aggressively. And if that continues, obviously the banks need enough capital, enough buffer in case they create risk assets that run into NPLs. So I think that is very good for the banking sector.
And speaking of loans, what is your view on the Narcel Microfinance Bank? In view of the fact that we have had People's Bank before and that failed, similar initiatives have failed. What's your opinion on that? Because the whole idea is access to credit for MSMEs. Will it work?
Well, I would say, just like you mentioned, the People's Bank hasn't really lived to expectation. We hope that this will. Because access to capital is one of the key challenges that SMEs have in Nigeria. And based on different studies by World Bank and IMF, if you look at what has really driven growth in economies that are transitioning from developing to developed economies, like capital deepening, which has to do with the capital efficiency, how efficient businesses have been able to use capital. So if you don't have access to capital, and there's no way of saying you will be efficient or not. So that is very key. So we think that the government is doing the right thing in this regard to be able to create risk assets at such low interest rate to this class of people, exactly to this class of people. But obviously, what we'll look at will be the implementation and also the output. Are this class of people able to use these loans efficiently, and what's the NPL that's coming out from that sector?
Fantastic. I want to go back to agriculture for a minute, and just also to piggyback on this. There's been quite a number of initiatives, especially interventions from CBN, from BOI on sort of single-digit loans in the agriculture sector. When you look at year-on-year growth of the agriculture sector, how do you think we're doing on diversification, and what would you like to see the projections look like?
So I would say the sector hasn't really done bad, but like I mentioned earlier on, it's still mostly driven by subsistence farming, and that's not going to take us to where we need to be
And
as
these
a country.
interventions, why are they not sort of taking us from subsistent farming to more industrial farming?
Well, we're seeing it, but it's still largely subsistence. So relative to obviously developed economies, we're still way, way behind. So that shows that we have potential to grow. But you've seen the likes of, I don't want to call names of corporates here, but you've seen a few corporates come to Nigeria with mechanized farming approach, and that has been working in northern part of Nigeria, the western part of Nigeria, but we still have a largely subsistence farming structure, which in my view still shows that there's potential for the sector to grow from where it is right now to where it should be and compete globally.
Okay. So what do you think is an ideal percentage of growth rate for agriculture, like year on year? What should we be looking at?
That's an interesting question, really. Well, and then one would like to see growth at its highest level for any sector.
But what's
really
realistic for us, especially as a country that is aggressively trying to diversify, and agriculture has been a key talking point of this administration
Exactly.
last time
I love
and this
that
time.
question.
Yeah.
Because double-digit growth, what does that mean? Yes.
Well, so double-digit growth in the agricultural sector would be very good. That's the truth.
Is it achievable?
Like I said, it has to do with productivity. So if we're able to increase our productivity in the sector, then that'd be good. So for example, the telecom sector is growing double digits.
But the telecom sector is because of the huge infusion of
capital. Exactly. So
and global capital too.
Exactly.
Are we seeing the same type of global capital in these other sectors?
Yeah, we're seeing, but obviously not to the magnitude in the telecom sector, and that's the truth. But we're seeing foreign internationals coming to Nigeria, trying to adopt a mechanized farming to be able to increase productivity. So we're seeing that also. We also know the sector is also one of the largest employer of labor in Nigeria also. So we're seeing that, well, like I said, it still has, more room for growth.
So according to the CBN, they're trying to take us with agriculture from $2 billion in 2018 to $12 billion by 2023. Is it feasible?
Well, so I haven't seen the detail of the roadmap by, the central bank, but
because you were busy putting your report together.
But I mean the details of taking from 2 billion to 12 billion. Obviously, there's a roadmap, there's a strategy. We've had that discussion, so it's a possibility. But until I see the fine details, I really can't put my hand and say it's going to happen.
All right, I want to take us to manufacturing and actually textile a little bit. When in your analysis, what actually what areas were driving manufacturing growth? And I also want to then talk a little bit about textile, because this has also been one of the things that the CBN governor has actually been making a focal point of his plan as well, is growing the textile industry. And I wanted to see, what's going on in the textile industry from a growth perspective when you look at the manufacturing sector?
Okay, so to look at Nigeria's GDP as a whole, it's about 46 sector categorization by the National Bureau of Statistics. And, out of these 46 subcategories, you have basically two coming to the party. That's the telecoms and also agriculture. That shows that there's a whole lot of potential from the other 44 sectors. Manufacturing is one of them that hasn't really, done well over time. In terms of, as a country, our manufacturing utilization, it's around 55–57%, so we still have room to grow. Obviously, the recession hasn't really helped. Corporates haven't really been able to put out so much products because the demand isn't really there at the moment. So for the textile industry, basically, I think what the CBN is trying to do is also to help indigenous companies and more like help companies produce things locally. We've had items that have been put on the 41 items ban list, and we've seen increased production of those items in Nigeria.
Have we?
Yes. So when we went into a recession, when we didn't have effects, we've seen corporates, or I'll say shops, supermarkets, asking for companies that can produce goods locally to come forward. You go through a quality control test, you produce the goods, and they put it on their shelf. But some large corporates in Nigeria, where basically they import agricultural products to produce their goods, are now sponsoring farmers, doing backward integration to be able to have such products available. So I think it's a good one. The textile industry really has underperformed really over the years, so the growth hasn't really been great. So if this comes to light and is well implemented, I think it's positive for the sector.
Well, that leads me to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is in the headlines today. In this day, Nigeria loses out as EU offers affected signatories 40 billion euro grants. And now, before we get to that, we saw a few days ago that the Presidential Committee, headed by Dr. Desmond Gubardia, recommended that Nigeria can go ahead and join. But the president, in his words and manner of delivery, we're not entirely sure if he's going to sort of rubber stamp that recommendation. Can you take us through the risks, the benefits? Because the benefits have been touted. We have this headline today about the benefits, but is it really that beneficial for our economy? And when will we likely feel the impact, if at all we do sign?
Okay, so the AFCFTA, it's a policy. Obviously, there have been a lot of discussions on that, by different countries. We've had our own government put up a team to look at the impact, that will have on Nigeria. And I think that's my view is that I'm for the market. I like free trade. So no restriction on trades and all that. So I think it will be positive for Nigeria. But it's just to go into the fine details and make sure that, as a country, we don't end up being a dumping ground. I think that's the view of the government, really trying to look at the fine details of that. But overall, I think free trade is good for our country. So, for example, we have cement manufacturers in Nigeria that are currently exporting cement from Nigeria to other parts of the country. And one of the challenges that's been mentioned is free trade, basically. So you probably move through trucks, you're stuck at the border for weeks because there's no trade agreement. So that also ties down capital and negatively impacts us as a country. So if the fine details are being sorted out, I think it's positive for Nigeria as well.
When will we feel the impacts, do you think?
Well, I think on the manufacturing side, so what I keep telling people is if you look at where Nigeria is located at the Gulf of Guinea, right? Nigeria has access to different parts of the world via the ports, that's the sea. And if Nigeria becomes a manufacturing hub for Africa because of its location, then it's positive for Nigeria. So basically, I think from the manufacturing side is where we'd like to see things pick up for Nigeria.
What do you think is happening now, especially when you look at growth and you look at infrastructure projects and some of the construction projects? Do you feel that these are also places where there can be a lot more growth and they're also where we're not reaching our potential? And how much of that are we sort of leaving on the table?
So infrastructure is a very big one for us as a country. And I think it's a low-hanging fruit that both government and the private sector can actually latch on to drive growth. So there was a recent study by the World Bank on infrastructure, basically just fixing the port alone shows multiplier effect. It's a particular corporate that I cover, as a company, and one of the reasons why they actually increased their inventory massively, tying down capital, was because of they were not sure of the logistics operation of their ports. So we're not sure how quick their goods will come in or go out. So they just say, okay, let's just ship in so much inventory. So that's
right, we're going to make you hold that. We're going to let you hold that thought, and when we come back, we're going to come back to you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to learn more about the opportunities in the economy. Welcome back. We're still in studio with Gbenga Sholotan, Head of Research and Equity at RMB here in Nigeria, telling us about the opportunities in the economy and the growth in the real sector of the economy. So before we went on break, you were talking about a particular client that you cover or a particular industry that you cover, and just their confusion and how to manage port activity in Apapa. Can you pick up there, please?
Okay, so basically, this company actually imports the products from EU, basically, and so I noticed there was a huge inventory buildup in the books, and I called the FD, like, what's going on? How come? I've noticed over the past 9 months you've had gradual inventory buildup in your book. Like, yes, we have to because of the uncertainty around clearing goods in Apapa. So basically, the capital that this company should have used to do something else, it's like tied up in inventory. So that's just one of the disadvantages of not having an efficient, infrastructure in place for Nigeria. So if you look at the man hours also being spent in traffic, also that's also capital being lost. But obviously, no one pays attention to people spending 3-4 hours in traffic. So just assume you were employed in a company where you've been paid on an hourly basis. The hours you're losing in traffic equals to the wages you're losing. Then we put a number to that, and we see that not having a good infrastructure in place, it's not really positive for Nigeria as a country.
So it's all about where capital is tied up. Actually, we have a breaking story, and we're going to go live on site now to Koza, the church in where there is a protest. This is What is the full name of the church now? It's COSA. It is
Commonwealth Assembly,
Zion Assembly, where yesterday, during the week, the pastor was alleged to be accused of rape by Mrs. Busola Dakolo. Today, there are people actually outside of the church protesting, and that's what you're seeing right now. That's a developing story that we're going to keep an eye on.
Please, staff, we are still waiting for some people. I'm trying to gather this way. Please, very important. Don't get dragged anymore.
We can't hear anyone talking to us.
Please, because we don't want the message to be turned to something else. There's a specific message we are here for. There's a specific reason we are here, and it's not about antagonizing anybody or trying to. You understand me?
All right. We're going to continue with our interview with Gbenga Sholotan. This is a developing story. We will keep an eye on it and be going in and out. But back to the economy.
Okay. So basically, I think the way forward is for public-private partnership, really. The government, as a government, can't really fund all infrastructure projects in Nigeria because that will take ages, and the world is moving. No one is waiting for Nigeria. So for us to progress in terms of infrastructure, there has to be a framework, a legal framework, sanctity of contract. When the private sector provides capital, not minding who the next government is, the current government or the opposition, that the sanctity of contract will be respected, that the contract will be held as contract. And I think that's where we need to be as a country before we see PPP actually taking a huge part in infrastructure development in the country.
So right now, we've talked about the monetary policy, but right now we do have a vacuum. We actually don't have a cabinet. We only have a president. What would you like to see Nigeria going fiscally with our fiscal policies?
Well, so I would say until we have the names of the people that will take us, over the next 4 years, it's difficult to call the policy direction. But in terms of where I would like to see the fiscal policy go, I would like to see a bit of fiscal discipline. I would like to see the gasoline subsidies being removed. I think I'll just spend a bit of time on that. So I have an analysis where I looked at gasoline subsidies. So if oil remains at about $70 per barrel, the currency maybe at current levels, then you have the subsidy about $6 billion annually. That's not sustainable. The government's deficit is about the same amount, 2.4, 2.5 trillion naira, which up. So basically, this just simply implies, for us to plug the deficit in Nigeria, the government needs to borrow to plug the deficit. That's the difference between your income and your revenue in a layman's term. So for that to happen, the government needs to borrow. So obviously, if you have subsidy that equals to your deficit, that simply means that you're borrowing to fund deficit. So basically, I think the subsidy needs to go. I think that's a key catalyst or a key stimulus for Nigeria. And if the subsidy needs to go, then if the government uses the funds from the subsidy to actually, drive infrastructure growth or provide the safety nets, for the poor in the country, I think that will be positive in plugging the gap.
So sorry, in actuality, the cost of the subsidy is actually much higher than what we are actually looking at, because basically what we have to do is look at the cost of borrowing, the cost of servicing those loans, and actually add that up as really the real cost of the subsidy.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at Nigeria's debt service to revenue, it's currently around 65%. Yes. That means for every $1 we earn, 65 cents goes to servicing debt. So that's yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not sustainable. So we need to see the fiscal come to the table and do a few things to really reposition our economy.
I mean, one of the things that was said during the conference, and you touched on it, was there were two FDI organizations on the panel. One was BOI and one was IFC. And what MF from IFC said was that for them to bring more capital into the market, they need to see a couple of things. One was rule of law, which you touched on. Obviously, the subsidy was one of them as well. One of the things that people like that need to see in this next cabinet for them to be open and ready, and also one of the biggest things that she talked about was development of MSMEs as well, rather than, there's been such a huge focus on SMEs that we're not able to get people to that next level where really that's where the real jobs are being created. What do you think that this administration needs to be looking out for and the type of people they need to sort of put in that cabinet. Number one, so that people like IFCC feel confident about bringing more capital into the market.
Okay, so for there to be, capital in the market, capital likes a free market, basically. So I think that's one. Also, capital likes where you have, regulatory certainty. That's also
You know what, let me do one thing, sorry. We're going to get you a glass of water. Can we just get him a glass of water, please? Yeah, sorry. Sometimes we have to break protocol to get people water. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, there. We'll let you drink your...
Yeah,
So capital likes free markets.
Yeah, capital likes a free market. Capital also likes certainty, basically, in terms of regulatory certainty, political certainty. So that's what the market likes also. So because the market likes, capital seeks where there's great return and there's low risk, but the higher the risk, the market expects a higher return. So regulatory certainty is very key for the market, really, to attract capital.
And do you think that by just the appointment of a new cabinet is the beginning of sort of getting the international market to feel confident again, or even local capital? Because what you're saying is there's actually local capital also tied up in so many different uncertainties.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said earlier on, I think we will have to have the names really of the cabinet members for us to know what the direction will be in terms of will the market be comfortable with the names that we put forward? Are those names the ones that will take us to the next level? Because over the last, I'll say, 8 years, there's been a promise of growth for Nigeria. And that promise really hasn't really come, to light. So it also remains a promise. So we still need to know will the next cabinet be the one to take us to where we need to be in terms of growth.
Yeah, but even before the names, we should have some kind of idea, because part of the problems that were identified with regards to CBN was that they had to really straddle monetary and fiscal policies. There was such a vacuum, and that's even when we had a Minister of Finance, pardon me, And now we need to start to identify what needs to be done to relieve pressure on CBN. Even look at CBN's 5-year plan has CBN providing seedlings, really.
Yes, I mean...
Okay, so for the CBN has, I'll say, twin responsibility of both monetary and developmental activities because of the CBN Act allows the CBN to partake in developmental activities. So that's why you have all these intervention funds that the CBN is doing to be able to support the real economy. So if you also look at it from the perspective of monetary policy, I know the key focus of the CBN is price stability, basically, which is good. But in terms of the modern monetary policies, it also implies economic growth, because if you look at the U.S. Fed right now, we all know that the U.S. is tending towards a recession, and then it calls for the Fed to cut rates. So basically, if the Fed cuts rates, if it transmits to the economy, consumption increases, and also that also drives growth. So basically, that's what the CBN is also doing. The first time since July 2016, the CBN cuts its monetary policy rate from 14 to 13.5%. The whole idea is to spur growth. But another school of thought here is that does this really transmit to the real sector? So that's key for everyone to look at. So yeah, I understand what you're saying in terms of the CBN doing modern monetary policy. Its act allows it to do it, but at what extent? So I think the monetary policy is in place. CBN is doing well with that. But we also need to see the fiscal side of things. That's the federal government come to the party. We know there are a bit of documents, ERGP being put out there. We just need to see implementation of those things.
So one of the things that we talked a little bit about on Tuesday was the minimum wage and inflation. I would like for you to sort of give us a sense of what your analysis are on around how the minimum wage is going to affect the economy at whole and actually the rate of inflation. And also one of the things that I've been really concerned about is when you look at the Gini coefficient in other countries and in Nigeria, even when you look at how far a dollar goes in a place like Pakistan and how far a dollar goes in a place like Nigeria, the consumer is just overburdened with so much inflation that there's just no. The naira just doesn't go far enough. How is all this going to come together, especially with an increased minimum wage?
So for the minimum wage, I personally think it's long overdue for there to be an increase in the minimum wage. It's been a while since the minimum wage was actually increased. And if you look at the real wage growth, for Nigeria vis-a-vis other African countries, we've been the worst in Africa. Over 2013 to 2017, we've had negative real wage growth of about 4%. That's the available data by International Labour Organization. That's because we've had currency devaluation. We've also had high inflation over that period. So that has impacted the average Nigerian consumer. So the minimum wage coming at this point, I think it's positive for the country. So how would that impact inflation? So I have a few assumptions that I put in place to say, so right now, if we understand the path without a minimum wage, we keep going like as we are right now, we could end up the year at inflation of 11.5, 11.7% at the end of the year. But with the minimum wage, if implemented in the second half, at the beginning of the second half, obviously what I thought about was to look at the whole public sector and private sector, and assume maybe on a year-on-year basis you have 8% increase in nominal minimum wage as a country in Nigeria. And if you look at the lower...
We're going to go on a quick break. When we come back, we're going to pick that up. Stay with us. All right, we're back. We're still with Gbenga. Gbenga, you were talking, before we went on break, we were talking about inflation, and you had a couple of assumptions. Do you want to just sort of land that before we go to our next question?
Okay, so I said, if everything remains the way it is, expect inflation to close the year around 11.5, 11.6%. But with the minimum wage coming into place, basically assuming, most of the people that will get the full benefit of the minimum wage will actually be people at the lower end of the income class, and these people will use that to support food consumption, and that puts pressure on food prices. And on the back of that, that will dovetail into inflation. So inflation could close the year around 13%. If that works out, on average about 12% for the year.
Oh wow, that could be very interesting. I mean, how would that look in Nigeria if we end up having inflation at that rate?
Well, so we've had higher inflation basically in Nigeria, but obviously that was driven mostly by the currency devaluation and whatnot. But at 13%, that means we'll have to do more work going forward to actually bring it down. And that has a cost, really, in terms of government borrowings also, because the capital that finds the way into Nigeria will determine a real return. That's return above inflation. That means the cost of borrowing for the government will also go higher if inflation gets to 13%.
All right. Well, Gbenga, I think that we're going to go live, but I think that we almost are done with you. So here we are. We're at the protests. We're live here at the protests that are being held in several locations across Nigeria. This one here is Lagos. And once again, this is at the Commonwealth of Zion Assembly Church. It looks like there seems to be a lot of commotion going on here. Let's go to the live footage for some audio to see what's going on between the protesters and the police. Can we wrap up with Gbenga then? Okay, we didn't hear. Okay, sorry.
Protests have been held in several locations across Nigeria today against the pastor of Commonwealth of Zion Assembly Church, Biodun Fatoyinbo, who was this week accused of alleged rape. Arise correspondent Leko Agbelese is now standing by in Abuja to give an update on the protest. Good morning, Leko.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. I can see the protesters there adhering to the dress code. They're dressed in white tops as was requested. What's the atmosphere like there? What are people feeling? What are people saying? What are the numbers like?
Well, we we started gathering here as early as 7:30 this morning, and we're at the NNPC filling station. That's the meeting point in here in Gusape, and the march would actually begin by 9. So everyone is just getting ready, and I have with me here the Church 2 organizers, and they can just speak briefly and give us updates on what exactly is happening. So I have with me Lami, I have Etinosa, and I have Buki here with me. Good morning. Please, can you give us a situation report on what's going on?
Okay, so we are gathered here today just to have the protest march to the Koza Church. And we are doing this under the umbrella of Church 2 movement. We are simply doing this for one purpose. Busola Dakolo came out 2 days ago to lay allegations on the pastor of Commonwealth of Zion Assembly, Koza, that she was raped when she was a minor. She was just 17. So under the Nigerian law, she is not yet a consenting adult. Now, Busola Dakolo coming out here is just one too many. We know that S.A. Walter came out to levy some allegation of sexual abuse, 6 years. Yeah, so and they are 6 years ago, and then we have more people coming out. We can't keep quiet about this any longer. So one key thing we are saying is that sexual abuse in churches must be investigated when a pastor has been found wanting, and when a pastor, especially for a grave crime like this. We know rape is not just a crime, it is also a sin. So especially for something like this, we expect that such pastor should be asked to step down or suspended while proper investigation is carried out, so that when that investigation is done, he is declared guilty or not. He should not be allowed to hold leadership position until that investigation is done. So coming out today is to say we are watching. Rape will no longer be condoned in our worship houses, and that is why we are coming out today.
Very much. And Etinosa, do you have anything you want to add to quickly?
Yeah, Buki has said everything. It's actually it's actually heartbreaking to see the number of ladies that have been preyed upon by people that they're supposed to trust, people that they look up to, leaders in the church, and because of the silent culture, the culture of silence we have in the church and even in Nigeria, for years, people keep this in their heart, go through serious mental, psychological issues without knowing the reason why these things are happening. Every single one of us here has a story to tell. And this is the reason why we are out here. We're not coming against any church. We're not coming to attack any person. All we are saying is that enough is enough. Please listen to these ladies, listen to these victims, and let's get justice for them. That is what we are asking for. And this protest that we're organizing today is actually a silent protest. We're not coming to chant any songs here. We're not coming to look for any trouble. We just want to say, break that silence of not speaking up, of not being able to speak up, and when something drastic like this, traumatic, happens to you, and because you know that people will not believe you, people will ask you, where were you, what were you wearing? Imagine somebody was asking, why was she wearing a nightgown at 6:37 a.m. in her whole father's house? That was unbelievable. Somebody was calling it consensual rape. For goodness sake, what is consensual rape? So these are so many things that are really affected we don't have statistics, but we know that it's a very high percentage of Nigerian women and even men that have been affected by this rape culture. And we need it to end, please. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we also have Lami here also, and she has something to say quickly. Please, what do you have to say?
A lot of this has been happening, and for a very long time, and I mean decades, we have been silent about it. This just happened because the pastor in question today is a popular pastor. What of the churches that are not even known? What of the churches around the houses that people don't even know about? Children being raped, children being abused, girls, boys, teenagers. We're saying enough is enough today, and the reason why this is a silence, the significance of our lips being sealed, is because we've been silent for too long. It's because a lot of children have been threatened. It's because a lot of parents don't even listen to children because they assume that their spiritual fathers are saints, are holy, and cannot do such acts. But we are standing here to say that we are aware of these things. Some of us are victims. We know these stories. It's unacceptable that we keep sweeping this under the carpet. And today we are saying enough is enough. And it ends here. Justice must be served. prosecutions must be made and people must be jailed. So that moving forward, this never, or at least this is curbed. And this even stops at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Lami. And that's it. You've heard from participants and people here. And here we can see, just by my left, we can see someone holding the placard and with her lips also sealed. And yes, this is also to signify that they are standing against rape. Yes, that's the situation from here. And in a couple of minutes now, we shall be taking the silent march to the Koza Church here in Guzape.
Thank you, Lekon. How long is this expected to last today?
Well, from what I've gathered, I've heard that after the protest, after the silent march to the church, this is going to go on for 7 days. That's the information reaching me here, and said it will go on that they're going to write a letter to the Inspector General of Police and also other necessary agencies also.
Guys, we move in 4 minutes.
Okay, and in 4 minutes, actually gotten a message that in 4 minutes we'll be taking the march.
We can say male protester there. We can also see different age groups. So this is an issue that has clearly touched a nerve across the whole, different sectors of society. What is the general perception? What is the aim here? Because we also heard just now the word conviction. We heard jail. What is the aim, the immediate aim of this protest?
Please, can you say that again? I can't hear you.
I was asking what the aim of the protest is, because one of the ladies that you interviewed mentioned jail. Is it that the aim of the protest is to see people persecuted, convicted, and jailed? Or is it to just make a statement? What exactly is the ultimate goal here?
Well, the aim here is to put an end to rape, and well, according to what they're saying, that if the pastor in question, if he's found wanting, he must be suspended, and he must go through the right channels of justice. And people are actually here, they are here angered, and they are saying they want. They are saying they want rape to end. That's what they are standing. That's what they are standing against.
All right, Lekon, thank you so much for that. We'll come back to you later on in the day. Thank you very much. We'll go on a short break. When we come back, we'll have more in the studio talking to Gbenga about the economy. Welcome back. We're still in studio talking to Gbenga about the economy. Gbenga, before we wrap up today, we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the fact that there has been sort of the global chatter on a global slowdown. With Nigeria's ambition of double-digit growth, how does a global slowdown affect that?
Well, so the global slowdown and double-digit growth for Nigeria, I think, are two different things. Exactly. Because as a country, right, we're coming from low growth. Last year, around 1.8%. This year, the consensus is around 2.2%, 2.3% this year, maybe 2.5% next year. So in terms of double-digit growth, I think we're still a long way away from double-digit growth, except we see material policies, to unlock the rural sector growth. Because if you have a sector that contributes about 90% to your GDP, growing at 2.5%, that's not going to drive growth. Even if oil grows at 10%, oil is just 10% of your economy.
And can I chip in here as well? The IMF reports that Nigerians are going to experience an incremental decline in our income per capita until 2022. It's Forbes that says that Buhari-nomics, as they termed it, we're not going to reverse the effects until 2023. It's all quite a gloomy outlook that's been portrayed.
Yes, so like I said, we're having population growth at about 3%, GDP growth below 3%. That simply means that on a GDP per capita basis, the effect won't be felt, by Nigeria as a country. So there's a disconnect between your population growth and your GDP growth. So you'll expect that your economy grows faster than your population, and that's when you see the real effect of a per capita growth. So yeah, so that statistics actually aligns with what I have said now. So Nigeria needs to grow by at least, say, maybe 5% annually. Population growth remains about 3%, then there's a 2%, surplus in quotes, that would benefit, Nigerians as a whole. Yeah, so it's a tough one, really, until our economy begins to grow. If it grows double digit, but I don't see it growing double digit in the next 4 or 5 years, really. I think it's going to be a very tough one for us to grow double digit. Policies need to be put in place. The rural sector needs to come to the party. Access to capital needs to be improved for that to support growth. So I've looked at different research from IMF and World Bank. Access to capital is very key. Capital deepening, which is capital intensity, is very key. And also total factor productivity in terms of efficiency of both labor and capital is very key to drive sustainable growth in an economy. And I think that's where Nigeria needs to get to.
Give us examples of efficiency. Like, what do we do? So I know the port is one of them. What are other efficiencies that people can what are the low-hanging fruits of the efficiencies that this government today can say we're going to do? Because even Papa, as obvious as it is, it's not a quick win.
Yeah. It's proving quite intractable.
Yeah.
Well, so for low-hanging fruits, like I mentioned earlier, I think roads, basically transportation, it's very key.
Because also, once again, moving around in Lagos alone, has become just intractable. You don't want to get out there.
Especially when it rains.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, productivity
it's down. Yeah, so that's one. And also power is very key. At our conference, the CEO of Dista, that's Christian,
yes.
He mentioned power. He gave an estimate of about $15 to $16 billion being spent on self-generating power and diesel also. So that's 15 to 16 billion that most likely could have been put into investment or savings by Nigerians, being put to generate power, by your diesel generator, your petrol generators. So that's a capital that's not being utilized efficiently.
So that's 15 billion that is just for us powering
our homes, our offices, our personal lives. So that is a lot.
That is a lot.
Exactly. So you have all this capital that could have been used into productive use, being spent on things like this. So until we get to that level where capital, is being put to productive use to generate, more output for the country, then it's difficult to call double-digit growth.
One of the things that came up in the conference as well was actually the lack of investment in education and health. And health became a real, for IFC, health was a real indicator for them of because of that. That's also one of the reasons why they feel like there's just, from them, those are areas that need to be unlocked for investment to open up. And Nigeria has one of the lowest rates of education and health investments even on the continent.
Yeah, for health, I think I also recall you also mentioning, having a few people that want to come and shoot in Nigeria, and they're more concerned about what was the next hospital, what was the next health facility, and all that. It's also a low-hanging fruit.
By the way, it was when they sent me the list, because you live in Nigeria, you don't really think about these things. When they were asking me how many miles is this health facility, this teaching hospital, they wanted to understand that if anyone on their team got into any danger, there was access to appropriate health care and studio, just infrastructure, basic infrastructure.
So healthcare is also a low-hanging fruit, but obviously we'll need investment, in equipping our ICUs basically, because I was just reading a post by a friend whose mom lives in the UK. She was involved in an accident and all that, and she got the best of medical care. And he was like, if she was in Nigeria, she probably would have lost his mom and all of that. Wow. So basically,
sad stories.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that can be done in the healthcare. We've not scratched the surface in Nigeria. Investment in healthcare, investment in education, and also human capital as a whole is also very important to drive growth in Nigeria.
Well, Gbenga, thank you so much for coming, and we're definitely going to have you back because there's just so much to unpack, and I think that our viewers really gained a lot from your insight today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Gbenga. Our Rise correspondent, Alera Dediare, is standing by in Lagos to give us an update on the protests. Alera?
How will you feel if you are raped?
Good morning, Alera. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
We see that you're with a protester. We see that you're with a protester. She's very passionate about the...
Okay, it's pretty crazy right here. Security is tight. though a lot of the police guys are actually on ground to actually take charge in terms of putting things in place. If you get to see things are actually going on.
Alara, can we hear from the protester, please?
Okay, all right. So I have one of the ladies that have been an active member of this particular movement. I stand with Busola Dakolo. So let's get to meet you. What's going on right here?
We're actually campaigning, protesting that we want Pastor Biodu to step down.
Okay.
For over 25 years, Pastor Biodu keeps raping women. He keeps abusing the minors. He keeps molesting people. And everybody comes out, but they will say he has an higher grace. There has not been any justice. The last one was Busola Dakolo. There was a girl that he raped. He aborted 4, and the girl had kidney issues, and the girl died. Their family is coming out to talk. He has abused a lot of people. 3 weeks ago, a minor was abused by Pastor Biodu. We are saying enough is enough. We want justice. We want him to step down. We are not saying the church. We are saying he should come down. We want him to step down. We want justice for every abuse that Pastor Biodu has abused.
Okay. All right, Tunde.
Alara, thank you. What is the atmosphere there like? There was a bit of a melee a few minutes ago. What was going on there?
Tunde, the noise is pretty noisy right here. I guess I just need to take a step out of this place so I could hear you better.
Okay.
Hello, Tunde.
Yes, Alara, this is Biola. Can you give us a sense of what the atmosphere is like where you are? Where are the people? And what is the interaction between the protesters and the police?
Sorry, Biola, could you just take that again?
Sure. We just want to get a sense of the atmosphere. There seems to be a lot going on. Can you just describe to us what's going on? Is there security there? Is the police there? What is happening with the protests there? Because we just saw another protest in Abuja, which is a silent one, and yours seem very far from silent. So tell us a little bit about what's happening there.
Okay, all right. If I could get to hear you better clearly, Biola, what's actually went down at about this particular time? At about 7:45 a.m., there's one other woman, Mrs. Joe, or thereabouts. She came around down to this place, but the police guys actually dispersed her, told her to actually leave in front of the MNs to converge. So she had to move down to about 2 kilometers away from where they were meant to converge, and where she actually stayed till when others came around. Though we've seen the police guys coming around, they have their buses packed, and definitely everything has actually been calm right here.
Okay.
And we have different groups. Some are actually wearing the white and black jean, some are on black tops, and definitely every other things there. Going to carry a placard that gets to say, I stand with Busola Dakolo. Okay. Over to you, Biola.
Thank you. Alara, I mean, one of the things that we're getting from the Lagos protest is a clear message that they want the pastor to step down. Is that the consensus there, or do they have other objectives, or what are the other objectives that the protesters are trying to achieve?
Actually, all what they've been craving for is for the pastor to actually step down because of the things that he's been accused of. And if you get to see, it's actually the entrance of the church. That's where they're actually standing. They actually protested in front of the church. And there is a barricade where the security guys are actually stopping cars from diverting cars going into the church. There.
Is there a church service going on there this morning, Alera?
Of course, yes. There's a service going on. There's a service going on. People are actually going to church.
Have they had to go?
The cars that you can see right there, actually, those that are going to church now.
Okay. Has there been any interaction between the churchgoers and the protesters? And what has that been like?
Do you know one thing? Some of the protesters are actually members of COSA. That's just one amazing fact.
And they're asking for the pastor to step down.
Definitely, they're asking for the pastors to step down. And another thing again that is thrilling is you might probably just get to think that it's only just women and the females that want to just come out to protest. Well, we're going to see a lot of male folks coming out here. So I'll be speaking with one of them. Okay, sir, let's get to meet you.
All right.
A lot of people will probably just get to feel that you should not be protesting as a man. So what would you have to say?
Men should not be protesting. Don't I have a daughter
that will mistakenly enter this church at the age of 17 and he will become a prey to the predator and should not protest now that my daughter is still about 5 years? Oh no. If this man is not stopped, the tendency of him continue, if he has started long time ago, and up to today, we are still reading stories of what happened. Even last 2 years, SA Water was just 6 years away. I have gotten about 5 or 6 testimonies that said that their own happened last 2 years, their own happened. We knew very well that if the shop come to be, you will see that there will be people that their own is still ongoing. You know why they cannot talk? Touch not my anointed. But you know the fallacy of that scripture is that touch not my anointed is not meant for pastors. Touch not my anointed is not meant to be caricature of what pastor hang on to continue any shenanigan. Touch not my anointed meant for the Israelites. In the book of Psalm 115 verse 5 where that came out, he was saying something to the Israelites, eulogizing God to tell God, this is what you have done for us. And in the day when the Egyptians want to attack us, he said, touch not my anointed. But today's Nigerian pastor, and never they entered into that shenanigan, the next thing you will hear, touch not my anointed. I will touch any anointed pastor that think it is anointed and cannot be taught. I will touch as many as possible. Why? I am also anointed. The book of Revelation chapter 8 verse 12 told me that I have been made priests and kings to reign wherever I am. So when you hear pastors say, touch not my anointed, some of them that does not know what the Bible says will think it is exclusively their right. It is not right for anybody. That message and that passage of the Bible was relating to the Israelites and what God did in their life in the land of Egypt. But today's pastor, especially Nigerian pastor, the Fidodidos Nigerian pastors.
Okay. All right, sir, if you could... Going back, you said in 2013, Esther Walter came out and she accused Pastor Biodu Fatoyinbo of the same allegation. Then, what would you have to say? It didn't get to create enough buzz like this. A lot of people felt Esther was lying then.
You know, what happened in the case of Esther was because he narrated his own case, our own case, like a satire. I still read it yesterday. More or less like a comic relief. She felt that she has overcome the temptation, she has overcome the whims and the caprices of Biodu Fatoyinbo, and at the end of the day, he felt that I am now relieved. Let me let the people know what I've been battling in my heart. This is different from Busola Home. Busola Home was encapsulated to be a violation of rights.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk to you later in the show. It's time now for a short break.